Good morning, everyone. In today's class, we will be paying attention on fault lines in China. The reason why I have taken this particular topic is, as we all know, uh, even before the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, China always in the news, especially with increasing its rivalry with USA. Okay, so with that reason, especially with this going trade war, it's always in the news. At the same time, there is also another reason for its being in the news is the continuous going of this protests in Hong Kong. Okay, in the recent past, when the issue with respect to World Health, Taiwan's re-entry into World's Health Assembly, the one that is part of WHO. Okay. Again, there are questions that came about to what extent we have to support this policy. Shall we allow the re-entry of Taiwan into the World Health Assembly or not? So in this way, different kind of questions, China is always in the headlines. So in this context, I felt like it is appropriate to give a brief about what are the existing fault lines in China right now. Here, fault lines means if you take the case of India. In the case of India, we have certain existing fault lines. Like if you take region wise, in the northern region, especially in the Kashmir Valley, there we have challenge like terrorism. If you take the case of northeastern region of the country, there we have challenges like insurgency and militancy. If you take the case of central India, especially Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Bihar, and parts of Odisha, there we have the challenge of Maoism, what we call as Naxalism. And if you take the case across the country, we have a challenge fault line called as communalism. Okay. So what you call communal conflicts between and among communities on the lines of religion and caste. So we have these kinds of fault lines that are existing when it comes to India. In the similar way, if you take the case of China, there if you take region wise, so here we I identified certain fault lines according to the region. If you take the northwestern region, here what we have is Xinjiang Autonomous Region. There we have the presence of this particular community, Uigurs, Uygurs. So, because of them and their treatment of China, especially the Chinese government with respect to this population is quite harsh. So, due to which, it is one kind of fault line. Like here, you can compare this with Kashmir. Though in the intensity of this fault line is not that much like Kashmir, but it's also comparable. Okay, so like that first, so first what we will be doing is like we will be discussing about all the existing fault lines. Then in what way China wants to deal with these fault lines and like what are the guiding principles of Chinese um, foreign policy. And due to the recent challenges because of the re-emergence of these fault lines, what kind of impact it will be having on China. And because as China is the closest rivalry to India in the Asian region, so India will be definitely keenly observing the kind of changes or the kind of churn that is going on within China. India will be definitely keenly observing that. So, how India can actually view these issues? How can we study or how can we understand these issues? At the same time, to these existing fault lines, how China is actually reacting, in what way it is trying to cover up these issues, in what way it is trying to strengthen itself by way of diluting these issues. At the same time, as we all know, there is growing intensity of aggression in both the economic and political terms between India and China. So definitely, India also should react to the Chinese actions or to the kind of changes that we are seeing when it comes to China. India too definitely should react. As we all know, the only competitor to China equally on par in terms of size, in terms of economy in the coming years, will be definitely India. So with this reason, India must see and react with respect to Chinese maneuvers. Suppose it can be in terms of reaction to the recent Chinese intrusions into the Ladakh region, okay, or its criticism with respect to China's what you call support to the WHO, sorry, in WHO's support to China indirectly and facing criticism for that, especially in India. Okay, at the same time, with respect to this Chinese initiative, the famous one, the Belt and Road Initiative. So, to this initiative, India is the first one to openly disagree with it. We did not sign the Belt and Road Agreement. Okay, so like that. So, first we'll be discussing fault line by fault line, then we'll be going to the rest of the topics. So, first one, if you divide China into different regions, right now, the Chinese development, what we are seeing, is actually happening on the eastern side. The eastern side of China, if you see, there right now we are actually seeing the whole development with the formation of what you call special economic zones. So most of the development is actually happening on the eastern side. Okay, Xinjiang is actually located in the west. So west means here it is actually connecting to the Central Asia. So, in the year 1949, when this Chinese revolution started under the leadership of Mao, okay, so these people went up to the Xinjiang, so they annexed it. So there, what we have a group of population more than 70 percentage, more than 70 percentage of the Xinjiang's population is Uyghur population. So this Uyghur population were taken control of. So previously it used to be called as Uyghur Autonomous Region. Later they renamed that as Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. So now China will be having a complete control over it. The reason why China wants this particular region is it is connecting this particular Xinjiang region connecting China to South Asia, especially via this Pakistan. Suppose recently we have this example, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor as part of Belt and Road Initiative of China. This China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is actually coming from Xinjiang. There is a there is a place in Xinjiang called as Kasgar, Kasgar. So from Kasgar to Gwadar, so there is a industrial corridor, what we call that famously as the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, connecting China to the Gwadar port, getting access to Indian Ocean. Okay, so in that context, China will be having very strategic advantage by having its control over Xinjiang. Actually, Xinjiang means what? In Chinese terms, Xinjiang means the frontier. The frontier means from where its sovereignty begins. Okay, so in this way, China is on the expansionist mode, but at the same time, it neglected the challenges of the people, especially the local Uyghurs culture. Because after starting of the Chinese Revolution in 1949, immediately in few years, they came up with another revolution called as Cultural Revolution. So under this Cultural Revolution, they want to establish only one culture, what we call that as monoculture. Okay, so there won't be much of respect to other cultures. That's why in one of the famous book, India Grows at Midnight. Okay, so in that book, the author mentions. So Indian culture is like a salad bowl. Chinese culture is like a what you call melting pot. If you take the pot, all the cultures are getting melted into common culture. So in that way, when China started its aggression by unifying all the cultures into a common culture, what you call what people famously will criticize this as Han's culture, because majority of the Chinese are the Han population. So in that way, when they did, Uyghurs also revolted against it. So what we call this presently as this Uyghur rebellion. Okay, sometimes some of the Uyghur Muslims, they were even called as terrorists by China. So and eventually suppressing them. In that way, right now, if you take one of the fault lines that is still continuing when it comes to China is Xinjiang. especially because of the cultural difference, and the Chinese government's dominance into the Xinjiang region. So that's why now China also realized with that reason. Now, previously it maintained mostly the suppressionist tone. Now, by softening its suppressionist tone, now it wants to pay more attention on the economic aspect of it. So that's the reason, one of the reasons why it has to go for extensively this BRI is to strengthen the Xinjiang region. So that's about Xinjiang. Next one, if you come to another fault line, is Tibet. As you all know, previously, before annexation of Tibet by the PRC means People's Republic China. We should know a bit information about it here. If you see China's politics, if you observe China's internal politics, till entry of the Mao, till the entry of Mao Zedong in the year 1949, China actually used to be under the control of another regime, what we call that as Republic of People's China. But after 1949, because why I took 1949? Because in that year the Chinese Revolution took place. But before that itself, especially with the formation of United Nations, China became an active member into that. Because after collaborating with USA to have a control over Japan, eventually it got the membership in the United Nations Security Council as one of the winning powers. So the five members of the United Nations Security Council, P5, United States, United Kingdom, Russia, France, and China. So in that way, China took the membership in the United Nations Security Council, especially by the Republic of People's China, not Mao's China, Republic of People's China (RPC). But after that, when the Mao went for this Chinese Revolution, he took control of the whole China and thrown away the people of Republic of People's China, and he established People's Republic China (PRC). People's Republic China, Communist Party of China, People's Liberation Army. So these all are these Mao's communism, Maoist spread of communism. Eventually, once they took control of the central government of China, then they are in the mode of expansion. In the mode of expansion, they reach to the already autonomous region. Tibet is an autonomous region within the China for so long. China will be just having a strategic control over Tibet, but Tibet used to be an autonomous region. But now Mao wants to have complete control over the Tibet. So this eventually led to occupation of incorporation of Tibet into the Chinese territory in the year 1951. And after that, again, as I mentioned, starting of this cultural revolution. So with the start of cultural revolution, especially the Buddhism within the Tibet, okay, they for them the highest religious leader is Dalai Lama. So Dalai Lama is a religious position. So there will be a separate names for each Dalai Lama. Suppose, for example, the present Dalai Lama is 14th Dalai Lama, 1-4, Tenjin Gyatso. Tenjin Gyatso is actually his name. So this Dalai Lama, the highest religious head in the Tibetan Buddhists, he has to flee away from his place and should go, and he has to come to India. The reason, and the Chinese oppression, and they want to have a complete control over the Tibetans. So eventually Tibetans has to go for this uprising, and that will be heavily crushed by China. And after that, it also disturbs its relationship with India, because that was the year when the year 1959 when Dalai Lama came to India. From then onwards, the relations will start straining. Just 4 years back, 4 years means in the year 1955, India and China signed the Panchashila Agreement, the 5 point cooperation agreement. So in that, almost all the points are with respect to maintaining strong, what you call bilateral relations. Okay, non-interference into the internal affairs, cooperation, non-using of territory. Okay, so there will be total five Panchashil points. But within 4 years, due to the Dalai Lama issue, the relationship will got further strained. Eventually, it got worse. after the 1962 war with China. Okay. So, and after that, they have a complete control over the Tibet, and eventual control further created challenges to India because mostly the Indian borders used to share with the Tibet Autonomous Region. It was divided by the Britishers. Suppose, for example, while dividing, Britishers got a clear idea on the eastern side. Eastern side means where we have the present Arunachal Pradesh. That's why there they were able to draw a proper line, what we call that line as McMahon line. But when it comes to West, there used to be some kind of challenges in the maps. So we are presenting one kind of maps because those places belongs to us, especially the Aksai Chul region. Sorry, the Ladakh region. The Ladakh region belongs to us, but China is claiming like those regions previously belongs to the Tibetan Autonomous Region. Now Tibetan Autonomous Region belongs to China, so that's why these places also should belong to China. So in that way, now China is having challenges with Bhutan, China also having challenges with India. Okay, so due to the issue of Tibet, it further created challenges in relationship with India. Okay, so Tibet is one of the major part here to understand India's political relationship with China. Okay, next is Taiwan. As I told you, the present Taiwan, the members of the present Taiwan were actually those who flee away in the year 1949 from China to a small island called as Taiwan. If you see down eastern side, sorry, southeastern side of China, if you see, there you can see this Taiwan. Taiwan will be located. So, in the year 1949, when Mao took control of China, some of the people from China, especially the previous government, it has to flee away to a small island called as Taiwan. From there, they feel like we will run the rest of the country, mainland China. But it won't happen after that, and Taiwan will maintain its independence. Still, it feels like China belongs to them, taken over by Mao. Okay, but now China is in a position that now it wants to have a complete control of Taiwan. So that's why recently when Taiwan wants to re-enter into this World Health Assembly as part of WHO, when it wants re-entry, China did not allow that to happen, because if that happens, we are recognizing another country called as Taiwan, because for China, Taiwan is just another part of it. Taiwan is like Tibet, Taiwan is like Xinjiang, Taiwan is like Hong Kong. So it is equal with the rest of the regions. So in that way, right now it wants to maintain relations with Taiwan, but eventually how the things will move, we have to wait and see, because Taiwan nowhere wants to be part of China, because they are maintaining like that, they're having their own army, they're having their own economic relations with other countries. They have one of the strongest manufacturing sector, especially this mobile phones and all 5G technologies. So they proved themselves stronger with increasing years. But China, if it wants to maintain relations with another countries, it makes that Taiwan should be considered as part of China. So in that way, now the thing is going on with respect to Taiwan-China relationship. Next, come to the Hong Kong. If you come to the Hong Kong, the recent issue, as you're seeing right now, in the recent past, the intensity of the protests and the continuity of the protests, both the things, intensity and continuity, both are going on. The intensity is getting increased. Since 2014, I'm seeing every year we are seeing continuous occurrence of protests in Hong Kong. Okay, and the recent issue is China's pushing for improvement in the basic law of Hong Kong. So now the question is, what exactly this basic law is all about? What exactly it is? So to understand this, let us go back to just a bit backward. Then we can understand. If you see Hong Kong and Macau, Hong Kong and Macau, Macau, Macau is one of the trading points. Same is the case with Hong Kong. So these used to be trading points for these what you call colonized countries, suppose like UK, Portuguese. So for Dutch, so for them these are the trading points. If you in that way, if you see, Hong Kong used to be a trading point for Britishers in China. So that's why eventually Hong Kong went under the control of Britishers. Macau went under the control of Portuguese. Okay. So eventually Portuguese will hand over Macau to China after end of this Second World War and all those things with increasing age, especially 1970s, 60s. When it comes to Hong Kong, for long China demands its control over Hong Kong. Eventually, in the year 1997, okay, so by signing an agreement, what is the agreement? In the next 50 years, in the next 50 years, so we will maintain next 50 years means up to up to 2047. So we will maintain a kind of dual government. Though Hong Kong will be under the sovereign control of China, but Hong Kong will have its own constitution, what we call the constitution as basic law. At the same time, Hong Kong will be having its own government. Okay, so this is what the sign in that agreement. But in the while the constitution was made, in the constitution itself, there mentioned certain provisions like suppose for example, if required, China can have its control over the Hong Kong constitution. If requires, national laws means the Chinese government's laws can be applicable even to the Hong Kong. So in that way, certain provisions were made. So by using these provisions, time and again, listen to this point carefully. By using these loopholes in the basic law, Chinese government time and again coming up with some kind of changes into the Hong Kong law, so that Hong Kong will become like part and parcel of the rest of the China, rather than having any special administered provisions. So when it was incorporated in the year 1997, just within few years we have seen the first pro-democracy movements. Okay, so we have seen that, and next from then on, in frequent occurrences, so we used to see one or the other kind of protest in Hong Kong against Chinese activities. Okay, and we have seen a revolution, what we call this umbrella revolution. People came with their umbrellas and they protested. It's a kind of pro-democracy movement against Chinese policies. And the recent one is with respect to the extradition law. If any person who got convicted in Hong Kong, they will be extradited to mainland China. So this is what the law proposed. So immediately Hong Kong people protested. If a person got arrested and convicted, the person should be treated within the Hong Kong jurisdiction, should not be taken to mainland, rest of the, should not be taken to the outside Hong Kong. So they felt like this is to arrest people for those who are actually protesting for a democracy, and taking them to the outside Hong Kong and extraditing them and harassing them. So this is what the Hong Kong people felt, and eventually they are into the protests. So these all fault lines eventually they started posing definitely challenges to China. So in what way China actually wants to guide its foreign policy? Okay. So because why I took up this particular thing again here, there is a discussion among different countries, especially after the post COVID-19 pandemic. Different countries wants to weigh their relations with China. So they want to reorient their relations. So in that way, they are into discussions. In what way we can counter China, or in what way we can maintain relations with China, either positively or negatively. So when this issue of maintaining relations with China comes, then we have to remember one important one. That is what we call as one China policy. China is very much clear with respect to this policy. But before going into the what exactly the policy is all about, let us try to understand another keyword, that is one China principle. What is this one China principle? So according to China, China in the sense here, the present China, the China that is under the control of the communist government, People's Republic China. As per People's Republic China, one China means all the regions. It means the mainland China, Tibet Autonomous Region, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan. All these are they are the part and parcel of China. There is no difference at all. That is actually called as one China principle. One China policy means it is just a dilution of one China principle. Under one China policy, still the complete control will be with China. It means the sovereign control is with China. No one can say that Tamil Nadu is an independent country. Sorry, Taiwan is an independent country, or don't think how come Tamil Nadu came here. Sorry for a slip of tongue. So, uh, if you take the case of either Taiwan, Xinjiang, or Tibet, under one China policy, they can have some kind of autonomy, but it does not mean that they can violate the sovereignty. So here, China is very much clear with respect to one point. If any country wants to have its relations with China, they should follow the one China policy. Without following one China policy, China will not allow for any kind of political and economic relations. So in that way, in the year 1979 itself, USA agreed to support this one China policy. So that's why it did not recognize. Though Taiwan proclaims itself as an independent country, but at the United Nations level, still Taiwan is not even a country. It is just part of China. Okay, so in that way, China strengthened its one China policy because it's very much clear. If any country wants to maintain relations with China, then they have to follow the one China policy. But now, why there are challenges to this one China policy? There are reasons. There are reasons. One of the reasons here is that now all the countries wants to have a kind of reorientation. So they're thinking like to what extent we have to support China. How much if we support, then how much in return we will get from China. If not, then why we have to support? So in that way, recently there used to be discussions even in India also, because we used to support one China policy. But now there are discussions. How long we can support it? Okay. Even the Trump recently made this as a election issue. He eventually succeeded in that. So to what extent we have to support one China? So now this when the international pressure starts, then definitely China also has to compromise to some extent. So this is the challenge with respect to its one China policy. Next is how it is actually impacting. As I told you, this one China policy, because of the intensified pressure from international community, China has to see in what way China has to compromise. China to support its one China policy. One China means Taiwan is part and parcel of China. So, but recently what happened? They want to allow, especially countries like USA, UK, France, Canada, these countries, Japan, these countries, they want re-entry of Taiwan into the World Health Assembly. So, to this, there is another discussion that is tracking the origin of the COVID-19 virus. Without naming China, there used to be two discussions. One is tracing the origin of COVID-19 virus. Second one is re-entry of Taiwan into the World Health Assembly. So China eventually has to choose one option because China doesn't have to choose both the options. Eventually, China has chosen the option of tracing the origin of COVID-19 virus because previously it denied this. So, at the cost of Taiwan's entry, because it doesn't want Taiwan to be discussed, or Taiwan, there used to be discussion on Taiwan to make its entry into the World Health Assembly. It doesn't want that. It even wants the discussion on COVID 19, but it doesn't want the discussion on Taiwan. So, in that context, so there are right now challenges to the one China policy of China. Sorry. Next is how it is definitely when it is impacting like this, it will be definitely impacting the Chinese superpower ambitions. It wants to have a control over the globe. It wants to become one of the superpowers. But these fault lines are actually denting Chinese image or China's ambition to become a superpower. So definitely it provides a strategic advantage because now to strengthen its relationship, this negative context of China can be used by India to strengthen its relationship, especially with the West. So yeah, India is actually getting succeeded in that, in strengthening its relationship with the West. So we are actually getting succeeded. So we are able to convince the West that China is a real threat. So until you all support India, because India is the only country where it can counter China, especially in Asia. So that's why in that context, India is also actually hedging here. So come and support India. Let's invest into India. Let's use the labor force in India. So in this way, India is reacting. India is actually taking steps. So to this impact, so how we should actually see these fault lines. As I told you, China always questions. Suppose sometimes it will change the boundary line with Jammu and Kashmir. It questions Arunachal Pradesh residents. Whenever China questions India's One India policy, because for us, Jammu and Kashmir, Arunachal Pradesh, they are part and parcel of India. But one time, what happened when Indian residents from Arunachal Pradesh, when they visited China, they were issued stapled visas, stapling with a pin, one separate sheet to their visas, by mentioning that you are the residents of Arunachal Pradesh. So differentiating the residents of Arunachal Pradesh from the rest of the India. So India made this as a bigger concern. And second one is whenever the issue of Kashmir comes up, China always supports or take the stand of Pakistan. So when China comes up with like questioning India's one China policy, now India also will get the chance to question Chinese one China policy. So in that way, we can actually balance our own policy. So that's why foreign relations are very dynamic and they're very complex. So, in this way, as I told you, now because we can tell to our neighbors, see in what way China is actually monopolizing the whole China, in what way it is suppressing its autonomous regions. So, this will be actually useful for India to strengthen its relations with the neighborhood. We can convince our neighbors. If you be with us, you can maintain your independent status. We can have a friendly relations. We can have friendly agreements. But if you be with China, one day you have to suffer heavily. Okay. At the same time, it will be also useful for India to strengthen its economic bargain. Now we are getting more products from China, but China is not allowing for our service sector. When these kind of pressurized situations comes up, we can use these pressurized situations to better bargain with China. Because we will tell China, if you need our support at the international level, then you have to come for some kind of trade-off. There need to be some kind of compensation. Same in the way, suppose for example, settling the border dispute or providing some kind of amicable solution to the border dispute. That's what, if you see recently what happened when China intruded into the Chinese forces intruded into the Indian side. We used all these dimensions. By using all these dimensions, we will be convinced the China. So do not try to intrude too much because we too have our own way of dealing with you. So to this, how China is actually reacting. Since 1949, how China actually started reacting to all these issues. One, as I told you, initially they went for this cultural revolution to unify the whole culture. Right now, as it is world's manufacturing hub, by using the acquired reserves, right now it is investing in the name of Belt and Road Initiative. It provides loans at a lower interest. Later, if they fail to pay back, then it will take control of the territories. So in that way, it is going for its economic expansion, where India actually we criticize. That's why. And one of the initiative of Belt and Road Initiative, the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, it is actually passing through one of the conflicting regions between India and Pakistan, the Gilgit-Baltistan. So that's why India mentioned that it's a violation of Indian sovereignty. So if we agrees with it, it violates our sovereignty. So that's why we do not agree with this agreement. Next, economic aid to the weaker nations, especially to Africa, and financing to the global institutions. As we have seen recently, the WHO and China issue, how the WHO got politicized with respect to um, tackling the COVID-19. Okay. Next is he actively becoming, you see, its balanced relationship with India by becoming a member of BRICS. It is strengthened its relation in Central Asia by creating and strengthening this SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Okay. So, engaging and cooperating with the rival. Suppose, for example, our rival is Pakistan. So, China's rival is India. So, here, strengthening relations with Pakistan. Okay. And making other countries to depend more on China for their um, economy. So, thereby, because right now it is world's manufacturing hub, thereby, in the coming future, it creates a dependency syndrome. Okay. So in that way, China is actually reacting to these issues. At the same time, I told you the very purpose of this Belt and Road Initiative is to strengthen the western region of China, that is the Xinjiang region. And finally, how India is reacting. As I told you, we are going for this international collaboration. International collaboration, that means suppose this we have this Quad 4. Quad 4 means quadrilateral alliance of four countries: India, Japan, Australia, United States. So these four countries, they want to strengthen their cooperation. That's why we name this as Indo-Pacific. The Indian Ocean region and the Pacific region, they want to cooperate, and they want to have more number of what you call military and political exercises. Suppose this what we call this Malabar exercise. Previously, it used to be a trilateral exercise. Trilateral means Japan, India, USA used to participate. But recently, Australia also started coming and participating in this. So here India is using international collaboration to strengthen its clout, at the same time to provide a counter to China. Next is, as I told you, collaboration with Japan for international assistance. The example here is Afro-Asian Corridor, strengthening relations of Asia with Africa by providing economic support to Africa. Okay. At the same time, we are also balancing the relationship with China, as by becoming member of BRICS, by becoming member of SCO. Okay. And we are even planning for this, as we have the youngest labor force in the country. So we want to strengthen our Make in Indian initiative so that we can reduce economic dependence on China. Next is, as I told you, we want to strengthen our clout in the Indian Ocean region because the ocean named after India. So definitely India will be having, just do one thing, just reverse the map of India and see to what extent both the sides we have the oceans. If you just reverse the map, then you can see to both sides of India we have ocean. So ocean is very much strategically important for India, especially the Indian Ocean region. So now China wants to counter India in the Indian Ocean region by coming up with infrastructural development across different ports. We have this Gwadar port, we have this Hambantota port. Okay, we have ports in Bangladesh, ports in Myanmar. So China wants to develop these ports. The reason is it wants to have its military and economic control in these regions. So for that, India is trying with this alternative like this quadrilateral alliance. Okay, joint military exercises with Sri Lanka. So in this way. So this incomprehensive because whichever international issue we are discussing, it should be linked with India's concerns and challenges. So in that context, we have taken up the Chinese fault lines and how China is actually reacting and how India is actually reacting. So in that context, we discuss this particular issue. So with that, I'm concluding the topic. Thank you.